Good morning and welcome to a new episode of Future of Europe. I am Ilona Nido and I'm delighted to welcome today Juliette Nevret, a student at the Catholic University of Lille in the master's degree European Law and Litigation. Today we'll talk about a landmark case in the European Court of Justice where the European Commission took Ireland to court over drinking water quality. Thank you, Juliette, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So the first question would be, can you start by telling us a bit more about this case and explain what it is about?
So in this case of 2024, the European Commission acted against the state of Ireland in an action for failure to fulfill obligations. So this kind of action is meant to ensure that member states' compliance with EU law is respected, since the CJEU can condemn the states to pay damages for their non-action and therefore put some kind of pressure on them to comply with the text at hand. In this case, the EU issued a directive giving requirements for the THM's concentration levels that should not be exceeded for drinking water to be safe. And Ireland failed to follow these levels in many areas, which endangered its population health.
THM sounds concerning. What is it and how are they on issue regarding safe drinking water?
So THM is the acronym for trihalomethanes, and they are disinfection byproducts, which means they are chemical compounds that form when water is disinfected with chlorine. Though disinfection of water is crucial for preventing waterborne diseases, the issue with THMs is that they've been associated with an increased bladder cancer risk when people are exposed to them for a considerable time or when they're too concentrated. That's why the EU set maximum concentration levels in the directive of 2024. So the issue here is that the state of Ireland did not meet the requirements for the maximum THM concentration levels, and more importantly, they failed to comply with the directive for nearly 20 years, which created a very serious health issue for its population and forced the Commission to take action. For example, between 2005 and 2018, Ireland had one of the highest percentage of bladder cancer cases attributable to THMs.
All right, so is it for this kind of issue that the EU issued the directive of 2024?
Yeah, exactly. The objective was to reduce this percentage, which would actually work theoretically, since almost 3% of annual bladder cancer risks linked to THM's exposure could be avoided if no country exceeded the EU requirements.
But then, while facing such a serious health issue, why didn't Ireland comply with the directive? And why did they struggle with compliance despite knowing the broader concerns risks?
Well, the main issue for Ireland is the nature of its water sources, which they argued constitute specific and geographical and environmental factors. Indeed, they contain peats, shallow topographical slopes, and higher than average rainfall, which means it's harder for them to meet the THM's concentration levels, especially when they also need to maintain an effective disinfection process. Therefore, they argued that their compliance with the directive required of them to restructure and install or upgrade new water treatment plants, which obviously requires a lot of time and a lot of money that they simply do not or did not have or invest in at the time.
Then the Commission rejected these arguments because the non-compliance lasted too long for it to be acceptable, even under the exception of the specific factors.
Yeah, exactly. The court then agreed with the Commission and found Ireland's efforts to be insufficient, given the long-standing nature of the problem and the health risk involved.
And how does this case connect to the broader vision of the future of Europe, especially as outlined in the Conference of the Future of Europe?
Well, this case is deeply aligned with the themes explored during the conference, particularly in areas like environment protection, public health, and EU governance, since it especially emphasized the need for stronger mechanisms to ensure the enforcement of EU laws and greater accountability for member states. The EU was able to demonstrate through this ruling its commitment to uphold shared values like the protection of human health and of the environment, which were identified as key priorities in the conference.
And what does this case tell us about the EU's approach to environmental public health issues in its future policy making?
Well, I think it reflects the EU's evolving focus on environmental sustainability and health resilience as central pillar of its future. The excessive level of THMs in Ireland's drinking water pose both environmental and public health risks, and the case highlights the EU's will to tackle such challenges with stringent enforcement of its directives, which also aligns with the conference call for stronger actions to mitigate environmental degradation and prioritize health in policymaking.
The conference also mentioned strengthening citizens' participation and awareness. How does this case reflect that?
Well, a key aspect of this case, besides public health, is the emphasis on transparency and the right of citizens to be informed about issues that directly affect their health and the environment. So as we can see in the directive, it requires member states to provide clear, accessible information about water quality and the measures taken to ensure safety, which mirrors the conference focus on empowering citizens with information, fostering trust in EU institutions, and enabling individuals to make informed choices about their lives.
And what does this case highlights for improvement in the EU's governance model, as discussed in the conference?
Well, absolutely. While the EU's legal framework for enforcing directives is robust, the case reveals certain limitations. The process of ensuring compliance depends heavily on member states' willingness to act, and delays can persist for years, as we saw with Ireland's decades-long non-compliance. So to remedy such issues, the conference called for stronger tools to enforce EU standards more effectively and to address challenges like this more swiftly, ensuring that the EU Union's policies deliver tangible benefits to its citizens in a timely manner.
Well, and finally, in what ways can the EU learn from this case to shape its future?
Well, I think firstly, this case reinforces the importance of accountability, transparency, and proactive governance, which are key themes of the Conference on the Future of Europe. By addressing the delays and the gaps in Ireland's compliance, the EU can therefore refine its mechanisms for ensuring that member states uphold their commitments. And then secondly, I think the emphasis on citizens' health and environmental protection also demonstrates how the EU can serve as a model for tackling global challenges like climate change and also public health crisis in the years ahead.
Well, thank you, Juliette, for your answers and your time, and thank you to everyone for watching this episode of Future of Europe.